Most people will just see the scoreline, but the result doesn't tell the real story because tactically, Newcastle proved that they belong at the top. In this episode, we'll explore the clever tactical change that helped Newcastle gain control, Arsenal's tactical shift that shows just how much Arteta respects Eddie Howe, and why the man of the match says everything about this Newcastle performance. So how did Newcastle dominate Arsenal in that first half? Eddie Howe always likes to tweak things game to game, and he did something really clever against the best defensive team in the Premier League. Now, when trying to press Newcastle high up the pitch, Arsenal played their usual 4-4-2 system off the ball. They had Trossard and Odegaard high in those central striker positions, trying to press the centre-backs, and then they had Declan Rice and Thomas Partey trying to press the double pivots, with Martinelli and Saka either side of them, marking a bit more zonally, trying to cut off a couple of different options into those wide areas. But what Newcastle did is what they've done in previous games. They played Fabian Schär, Botman and Dan Burn very split apart, with Dan Burn looking more as a left back than a left centre back, and Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes in that double pivot. Now, Botman plays this ball to Bruno, who bounces it back to Pope, but you start to see problems occurring in Arsenal's high press. You can see two players that are key to this Newcastle build-up, and they are Harvey Barnes and Tino Livramento. Tino Livramento inverting in from that left wing-back position, pushing into that central area, and Harvey Barnes, more of a winger by trade, playing in that central area on that right-hand side. And you can see the big problem it caused for Thomas Partey in particular. You can see him with his arms out. He doesn't know whether to go up to Tonali, who he should be man-marking in this scenario, or whether to stay with Tino Livramento. And all that does is, as that ball is played back to Botman, it frees a passing angle into Tonali's feet. He's able to turn. Partey is late in the press, and then Tonali plays a lovely little disguised ball as Tino Livramento makes a lovely movement inside of Thomas Partey. Then you've got Tino Livramento driving in that back line, and look at the amount of space him and Barnes would have had to drive if they were to receive the ball. Callum Wilson, Gordon and Jacob Murphy in those central and wide areas, pinning that back line, and it allowed Newcastle to progress through the thirds, through Arsenal's press on numerous occasions in that match. And it's even easier in this next example. Newcastle recycle that ball back to the back line, Botman plays a simple ball into Bruno's feet, Rice is a little bit late on the press, but he would expect the centre-backs or someone behind him to press up to Harvey Barnes. And look at the amount of space that Harvey Barnes has to receive this ball into. Bruno plays a lovely ball into his feet, nice and early, and then he's driving at that back line. Again, look at the positioning of the Newcastle players on that Arsenal back line, trying to stretch them, pin them back, and allow those spaces in between that defensive line and that midfield double pivot of Declan Rice and Thomas Partey. Newcastle had 5 shots on target in that first half, and that's the most shots that Arsenal have faced in any Premier League game since April 2023. And that was all without Alexander Isak. And that shows just how assured and accomplished that performance was in that first half, especially on the ball. But there was another sign that showed that Newcastle are now amongst the elite in the Premier League, and it was a tactical change from Mikel Arteta that showed the ultimate respect to Eddie Howe's Newcastle. Now, if you watch any Arsenal games this season, especially since Miles Lewis-Skelly has come into the side, you can see that Arsenal set up with the 3 at the back, and Miles Lewis-Skelly tucking in from that left-back position to make a double pivot with Thomas Partey. And for the first time since Lewis-Skelly's introduction at left-back in this Arsenal team, Arteta did something different. He played Lewis-Skelly in a traditional left-back role, staying in that wide area, and never in this whole game did he invert besides Thomas Partey. But why? Why did Arteta do this? Trigger warning for Arsenal fans. It's this. Declan Rice losing the ball on the edge of his own box against Newcastle in that Carabao Cup semi-final at St James's Park. Newcastle are one of the best high-pressing teams in the Premier League, and they love to win the ball in these central areas close to the opposition's goal. And it showed, not just with this change from Lewis-Skelly, but the amount of long balls that Ray was playing in this game, especially early on in the game. They didn't want Newcastle to get a foothold in the game defensively, and they wanted to bypass that high press. But even with all this tactical chess between the managers, it was an individual moment and individual players that decided this game. It took an insane finish from Declan Rice from the edge of the box to seal the result for Arsenal, and that was their first goal against Newcastle in the whole of this season. It was their 52nd shot against Newcastle across 4 games in all competitions. And it took an individual mistake from Gordon and a beautiful finish from Declan Rice to seal the result, and that's out of the hands of Eddie Howe. And the man of the match from this game showed just how well Newcastle performed in that first half. David Raya's performance in that first 17 minutes saved Arsenal, and there were 2 saves in particular that were of the highest quality. One was from Bruno Guimaraes and the other was from Harvey Barnes. And if you look at the Bruno save, it's actually Raya's mistake in the first place that causes this scenario, although he does atone for it later on. He plays a loose pass into the midfield area that Tonali reads. Tonali plays in Wilson and it somehow finds the feet of Bruno Guimaraes in this position. In the penalty area, near the penalty spot, about 12-13 yards out. He had a bit of momentum with him. You can't see it from the still image, so it wasn't as easy as it seems in this still. But look at the anticipation of David Raya. He already reads the triggers from Bruno Guimaraes that he's going to try and whip it into that bottom right-hand corner. You can see he's already leaning, about to push off to that left-hand side. And it's a beautiful save to just stop that ball going in. But it's what he does after that. The reaction, the agility to get back up and palm this away from Barnes, who's coming in on the second phase. And it's just beautiful goalkeeping from David Raya. But it didn't stop there. Harvey Barnes had a beautiful shot in the first half as well, deflected, and you can see the level of goalkeeping here, the level of skill on show from these still images. You can see that Harvey Barnes arrives on the edge of the box, and you can see where his original shot is going. Close down the throat of the goalkeeper, but it's deflected. And look at the change in direction from where it was going to where it ended up going. David Raya on that right foot, leans to that right hand side to pick up the ball and save it down his right hand side, and has to push off from that left hand side. Again, he doesn't take any steps. He doesn't have any time to take any steps to that left hand side and build momentum. He reacts so fast to push off from that right hand side back down to that left hand side and get a fingertip to this ball, and he tips it round the post. And that is Newcastle's game. They were just so unlucky that they had David Raya in goal in this Arsenal team, and it could have been so different in that first half. And it proved. You need to take your chances when you have momentum in a game, especially in big games and especially in away games. And you can see from the attacking threat graphic from Opta, Newcastle had big spells of pressure in that first half, but they were unable to capitalise, partly down to David Raya and a bit of a clinical touch that was missing from them in this game. But you can see, in that second half, when Arsenal built that period of pressure early on, they were able to get that goal from Declan Rice just as the momentum was tailing off. You can see just how vital that moment was in the game. If Arsenal didn't score that, maybe Newcastle would have built their way back into the game. But after that goal, they lost momentum, lost fluency. They had to make a couple of tactical changes, which built their momentum back in the game towards the end of that second half. But it was too little too late. They didn't really have any threat on goal towards the end of that game. And that showed. The difference in these big games is you have to take that moment when you have momentum. But even with the result, that was probably Newcastle's best ever away performance against Arsenal, and it showed Eddie Howe's tactical ability. And if they're able to secure that Champions League place against Everton on the last day of the season and build on it with the summer transfer window, bring a couple of quality additions in that first 11 and build out that squad depth, then Newcastle will be a dangerous team next season. Now, if you like this episode, make sure to like and subscribe. Check out another one of my episodes here, and I'll see you on the next episode of A Game of Two Halves.